Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Human Story, a podcast where we delve into people's motivation and inspiration. We talk about the lives of our guests and the paths, many times torturous paths, that have taken them from their very early childhood to the place where they are today. And talking about paths and journeys today, with me is John Cha. Hello there, sir.
Hi, how are
Hello
you?
there. Who was born in Manchuria in 1945. Together with his family, he made it to North Korea, or actually to Korea. He witnessed the fires of the Korean War there and aced out of the conflict, moving to the US, to Oakland, California, where he lived to become an accomplished writer and a family head, in fact, having 3 children and living himself in the US. He is the author of Willow Tree Shade, the Susan and Cuddy story, The Do or Die Entrepreneur, a Korean-American businessman's journey, and last but not least, Exit Emperor Kim Jong-il, notes from his former mentor. We will try to touch on every single of those titles throughout our podcast, but now, first things first. Manchuria, that sounds so exotic to, Poles, and having you here is such a privilege. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So, being born in Manchuria, what are the first memories or the first accounts that you can summon up, not necessarily of yourself, but also your family?
Right, yeah. The Manchuria, maybe I'll just talk about what Manchuria is first a little bit. And Manchuria originally was part of Korea. And actually, some people, Koreans, they voice their opinion that they should take back Manchuria from China, And anyway, the reason my parents went to Manchuria was because their parents were independence workers from Japanese occupation, and a lot of independence type workers, they moved to Manchuria from Korea because they couldn't do the independence work within Korea.
Yeah, because at the time Korea was under Japanese occupation.
Yes, and that was a pretty not the occupation itself was like a I guess any other occupation. They try to erase your culture. They
Ruthless.
And erase your language, and they were, if you resist, you were tortured, captured, tortured, and criminalized. And so my grandparents, both sides, they went to Manchuria, and my father was a teacher. Actually, let me go back. My father was born in North Korea in a town called Wonsan.
Does this town still exist today?
Still exists, and it's a beautiful town on the east side, seashore. And in fact, maybe we'll go to it later, but it's one of, Kim Jong-il was born there too.
An important piece of information for prospective discussions.
Yes,
yeah?
yes.
But Manchuria, yeah.
But so his father, my grandfather, he was a huge landowner there. And in fact, the story goes that you couldn't ride a horse from one side of his land to the other side in one day, and so I guess he had a pretty big piece of land over there anyway.
In Manchuria?
No, and this
in
was
Korea.
in one side.
In Korea.
Yeah. And
mind me if I interrupt. This means that your ancestors must have been of some sort of, noble lineage. If they had land.
Something, yeah. So,
okay.
I suppose you could say that, but we don't have any records, and so I can't say for sure. But he was a big landowner, and he did, do a lot of things that the Japanese didn't like, and so he was basically banished or chased away. And the only place you could go, well, it was Manchuria at the time, and my mother's father or parents, they were from North Korea also. They're from a town called Musan, and my mother's father, he was an elder in a Presbyterian church, and he was into education, and so he went to Manchuria, and my father moved to Manchuria when he was 4 years old. My mother was born in Manchuria, so they both became teachers, and they went to teach in a school, and that's where they met.
What subjects did they teach?
I think my mother was in elementary school. She taught music and language. And my father he taught history, basically, and writing.
Beautiful.
And they were, they met, and they decided to get married and have me.
They met in Manchuria?
In Manchuria.
In that school?
Yeah, in that school.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And back then, Manchuria was under Chinese authority, or was it ruled by the last emperor of China? Was it back then?
Yeah,
Puyi.
Puyi. Yeah, Puyi was the last emperor, and my mother talks about Puyi. And when he used to come into town, he would have a procession and, going by the streets. So she and her school all went out, and they had their yellow flag in their hands. That's the color of the Manchuria at the time. And so she talks about, waving the flag at Emperor Puyi and, yelling things.
It was a big thing.
It was a big thing, yeah. And at that time, I think that China was sort of in control of Manchuria. It's pretty dubious.
It's dubious because they say, according to the movie, The Last Emperor of China, which I do recommend, watch it. It's a great piece of cinematography, actually, yeah. According to that movie, and I think it's quite to the point, and Puyi was implanted by the Japanese, I think.
Yes.
He was basically, to his great distaste, he was a puppet monarch.
Yes. Yeah, he was a puppet monarch, and Manchuria itself, it was free for a time being, and then Japanese moved in 1931 under the guise of, there was some kind of explosion incident they created, and they went in, and from there they started to, meddle in the Manchurian affairs.
Yeah.
And they eventually
micromanage.
Yeah, took over Manchuria and Puyi, and it was set up by the Japanese, and so my mother was out there 1927, 28. So was Puyi So the Japanese, worked on this Manchurian project for quite a while, I guess, and eventually.
I think they came up with some phony name for it. Manchuria.
Manchuria, yes. Yeah, very good. Good memory, yeah. Manchuria, and my mother remembers the Japanese soldiers.
How did she describe them to you?
So Japanese soldiers were police, and the soldiers try to stay away as far as they can. And she was, obviously very afraid of them because they were sort of vicious. And there was what they call the Japanese consulate in the city of in Korean is Yongjang, but in Chinese Yongqing. It's by her neighborhood, and she would walk by there all the time to go to school when she was a young girl, and she always, avoided went around, and so
took the scenic route.
Yeah, and then of course her father was arrested and imprisoned by the Japanese police many times, and torture, of course.
Sorry to
But
hear
that was a usual thing at the time. So she doesn't have a good memory, fond memory of the Japanese soldiers. They were pretty vicious, yeah.
And also driven by their ideology, which was called Yamamoto, I think, or something around those lines.
Something, yeah.
And the ideology that Japanese are basically descendants of gods. Yeah. Which kind of mirrors the Nazi ideology back in the day in Germany.
Yeah, and so same goes for North Korea. There are gods anyway. That's another topic. But so back to Manchuria thing. There were a number of the well-known independence workers, and for some reason, that town, that Yongjang, it had a lot of writers. And I guess independence fighting or work starts with writing first, I guess, or something. But anyway, they did publish a lot of stuff. And one of the famous writers was my mother's brother's friend.
Okay.
And he was around all the time. He was a poet. And my mother's older cousin brother, he was also a writer. And he became sort of well-known in South Korea later.
Did they write pamphlets, leverets against the Japanese?
Yeah, mostly against Japanese, and they were obvious, in the beginning, but slowly they became more subtle, and
so it was an underground thing, like underground colportage.
Yes, yeah, it became underground corporate. And my grandfather, my mother's father, he was a director of hospital in Yongjang. That hospital was started by the Canadian missionaries. Okay. And because he was a Presbyterian elder, he was helping the administration of the hospital. But anyway, when the Canadian missionaries left under Japanese pressure, I think they left around 1939. They left the keys to the hospital to my grandfather, and he held on to it. And the Japanese soldiers, of course, they wanted those keys, and he wouldn't give them up, and so I guess he ended up being tortured. and eventually he was almost dead or something, and he had to give up the keys to the Japanese. And the church was famous because for a while, the hospital was protected because it's a missionary hospital. Japanese couldn't enter, so a lot of independence workers, they were there in the basement, and they made, flags and.
Oh, that was their workshop, kind of.
That was a workshop, yeah, and there was a big uprising in 1919. Didn't work out, but it was an uprising. That's where that was these, I guess, headquarters for the Manchurian region. So that's where the hospital. So I went to. There's an archive in Toronto now about the hospital. So I went to Toronto and looked through the archives and found some stuff very interesting. And but anyway, after the war, the Hiroshima, Japan surrendered.
1945.
August, and then the Russian troops came in.
How was that like?
That was some people, or I've heard some people say Japanese were kinder than the Russians.
Well, maybe to a certain degree more civilized. Well, you could perhaps you could argue, but still, I mean, I trust your account.
I haven't seen it myself, but I mean, I've heard, from various, people that I wrote about, and they were. I've heard my aunt talk about the time when she had to shave her head, pretend like she was a man, and because the Russian soldiers, they were raping women and children, or whoever was in skirts. So they, pretended like they were males, and ran basically, and she talked about how when she visited her old house from 1945, she had an incident where Russian soldiers come into the house chasing after her, so she ran through a window. In those days, they made windows or the doors out of paper, and
so she just ran through it.
Ran through it. Yeah, ran through it, and she went back sometime later to see the same door and the same hole. And so, lots of other stories, and there were Russian soldiers. I think it seems like they were more interested in, their personal pleasures and also things, and I guess they stole everything.
Yeah, the things the things you should not do even at war, but it is part of it. So pillaging, raping, burning things, raising them to the ground, and unleashing the demons of war.
And there's, a lot of people, they talk about, soldiers, they were crazy about watches.
It was the same in Poland. Yes, absolutely. Those are the same stories. The stories you're telling me I get a déjà vu, as if they were told by my grandmother. Fortunately, she kind of managed to survive the march of the Red Army unscathed, But she would tell stories, and not just she, our grandparents would recount those stories where there were Russian soldiers with a number of watches on their forearms, or even as high as to their elbows, just collecting them. And there is this one book, I don't remember the author, but the title is translated roughly the following way: the accounts of a Red Army soldier or a Red Army private. So basically there was a soldier who wrote down his memories, and basically he told stories of his comrades, one just taking a whole sink, with the faucet, with the taps, pulling it out of the wall, and he then walked to another place. I think he took it to another town and then tried to install it into the wall, and he installed it, but was devastated when he realized that there was no water flowing just from the wall when he so bittersweet, actually, quite grim, and at the same time absurd situations. But that only shows you that really all sort of folks from the darkest corner of the Soviet Union were conscripted and just sent off to wherever.
Exactly. Yeah.
This was the same story for Manchuria.
Yeah, same story, and they were definitely. I'm pretty sure they weren't the regular army, but they were probably advanced wolves. I don't know.
War bands.
Yeah. And anyway, so my parents, they decided, and around the same time, my father had an interesting experience after the liberation from the Japanese.
By the Russians? Liberation.
By these, in Manchuria was by the Russians.
Yeah. So-called liberation.
So-called liberation. My father was so happy. So he wrote a book in Korean, which was prohibited at the time, and he wrote it and printed it himself. In those days they had this crank machine, and so he bound it, and then put him in his, I think he called it rucksack or
rucksack,
yeah. And then he walked all over Manchuria and sold the books, and it was very popular, and so he made a lot of money. So
out of selling his own books. Amazing. Even in
Because
such
it was-
dire situation, he could,
because it was written in Korean, and they were very happy to see Korean book, and so he sold out whatever he printed, and then put him in his rucksack, and coming home, and then during the process, while he was walking home, he was countered by what do you call it? Thieves. They rode, horses. I forgot the word for it, but
like robbers, raiders.
They run around in bunches. They rode horses, and but anyway,
Fugitives. I don't know.
I don't know. I guess they were organized. They could call themselves some kind of a, I don't know. I guess they acted like military kind of.
Marauders, maybe.
Marauders, yeah. And then he was confronted by them. They took all his money. And so
was it his first?
They were Chinese.
Okay. Well, wherever you turn, there's someone skulking behind the corner to rob you, or sorry to hear that. Was it on the first day that he sold the books, or was it after some time?
After some time.
Thankfully, because that would be very discouraging.
They had a chance to celebrate
Mm-hmm.
the liberation, and sometime later he decided to write. I mean, there were no Korean books back then, and so I decided to write those books. But so he was so happy, but then, he lost it all, so...
Life.
So I guess, my mother said he came home and cried.
This must have been terrible. Yeah, devastating.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
So anyway, they decided, okay, this is not a place for them to stay. And I was...
you were born by the time.
I was born by that time.
1945.
Yeah, 1945, about 3 months after the
Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yeah, and so, my father was, pregnant with... my mother was pregnant with me, and then decided, okay, this is not a good place to raise a child. So
moving out.
He moved out, and there were a lot of people do the same thing, and so, and it was about the time. That was about the time when there was a big communist movement too. And so they decided, they chose between either staying in North Korea or go to South Korea.
But how did you move to North Korea? Was it on foot, or was it by car, on horseback?
It was on foot mostly. And
God, how many kilometers?
Yongjong it's about 30 miles, so maybe
40. Not that far. 40, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and then they had to cross the river. There's a, river between Manchuria and Korea. And so they crossed that river. It was in May 1946. And then they went to see my mother's parents in Busan and said basically goodbye, and then they rode a train from the border town and Wonsan, and from Wonsan to, by this time there was a 38th parallel, that line between north and south, and they got out. They had to cross another river, was located at 38th parallel. And on the north side of that river was called the Hantan River. Russian soldiers guarded the north side of the river, and the American soldiers guarded the south side.
So you had to slip past the Russians.
Yes.
Some way.
Yeah.
How did they do it?
Okay, this was nighttime operation, and they, of course, they had to cross the river at night, and because Russian soldiers were guarding, and they were shooting anybody crossing the river. And there was a guide. I guess there were a number of guides at that time, and collected 4 or 5 different families, and they're crossing the river. And in about the middle of the river, I guess I cried. I woke up, and so
in the middle of the river?
Yeah, in the middle of the river. And and so people, the villagers or the crossers, they said, oh, okay, we're all going to get shot, and so get quiet, and my mother's arguing, no, anyway, they wanted her to drown me, put me in the water, and apparently that was a thing to do at that time, because there were a lot of babies died because of that, and she fought off and fought. No, I'm not going to do that. Thank God. But anyway, after a little while, I stopped.
What a courageous woman! Yeah. I'm just speechless. She resisted the whole pressure. This is actually the most difficult thing to do for a woman, to resist social pressure, and she. Hands down resisted it.
Yeah, just no, we're not going to do that. That's out of question. And
amazing, so, amazing.
My father too was there, and trying to guard her and the baby. And so anyway, I guess I sensed there was some tension or something, and I stopped. And thank God. So
is it your first memory?
No, I don't remember that.
Okay, this is recounted to you.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Because I was only 6 months old at the time.
So you made it to the other side of the river?
Yeah, the other side of the river. And then I guess they ran like crazy, just ran. And then after half an hour or so, there was a guy on, side of the road smoking and said, oh, you don't have to run anymore now. You're south. So they said they didn't believe him, so they kept running.
and he's there just, puffing on his pipe or whatever, or cigarette.
Long pipe.
The traditional pipe, right? It's like, oh, what a fuss.
Yeah. And so, I guess Russian soldiers were shooting. I don't know why they do that. I mean, why they shoot people crossing the river? And the American soldiers, they weren't shooting, and they let us pass through. And so, I guess their sense was that, okay, we made the right decision, by going to the south. And so.
Amazing. And for a time being, you stayed in the South?
Yeah.
Okay. What was it like? Is it the moment where the first memories of yours come up, where you can actually summon up the first images and sounds?
Well, yeah, for the actual personal experience, the images and sounds. It comes when I was like 4.5, and that's when the Korean War started.
All right.
And that was 1950. And I remember that very clearly. And
were you with your parents or at the kindergarten, or what was life?
I was with my parents, and they were teaching, and they had a real humble. I think they first went to some dormitory of some school, but anyway, I watched the firefights, at night. And I must say, I was fascinated with all those bombings and shootings, and and night, all the bullets crossing, and the sounds were, you hear the whistles, and then boom, and we had to all hide underneath, go down the hill and go into the bunkers and stuff. I remember those things.
So was it a mix of terror and spellbinding, as in, were you in any way amazed? If I got you right, you were more, I don't know, more intrigued, more.
I think I was fascinated because of all this, explosions and stuff. I remember as kids, we were, there was a bunch of kids in the neighborhood. We used to go look for these shells, spent shells, and then the bullets they're intact with a pointed, and then they used to make those bullet tips and use it in a top, and the bigger shell you got, then you became sort of like, king of the day. And then, but I remember the night, time bombings and stuff, and I kept watching. Of course, my mother kept pulling me down. Get away from the window, that kind of a thing. But so that was fascinating. I didn't feel fear. They were, I guess, the North Korean. Well, I have a distinction of having lived under North Korean regime for about 6 months. When they, when they occupied, when they invaded South, they occupied Seoul in 3 days, and so that was really quick.
Quite a blitz.
Yeah, like a blitz. And so when they came, they were nice to kids. And they would, gather together all the kids and teach us song praising Kim Ir Sen, and I used to sing it. Apparently, I don't remember the words, but we all sang. And when I came home, I would sing it, and my mother would just tell me to stop. Stop singing that song.
Please quit it. Okay, because she knew what it's about.
Well, yeah, she got away from them, and
then her own child singing the song.
Yeah.
Okay. So was that the moment when you realized that there are different shades of gray to reality, perhaps?
Yeah. When you see dead bodies all over the place, then you get, something's wrong here, and this smell was, I would see, people actually dying. I saw some of those, and then, that's when, I started saying that, oh, this is not good. I felt that. Mm-hmm. And when the American forces like MacArthur came back and pushed them out, and that was October, November, December, around that time, and then they almost defeated the North. But when the Chinese came into the war, and they blitzed, and that was fast. And my parents decided, okay, that's enough of that. So they couldn't escape first time. This time they had time to escape. So we escaped to Busan, and that was middle of January, I guess, because the Chinese blitz was January 3rd. And the ironic thing was advanced troops were Chinese Koreans. There were a lot of Koreans. And they were not, a lot of them, they didn't have any weapons.
So just improvised weapons?
Just, yeah. And then they call it human wave, blitz. And the first line, would have rifles. When they got shot, the next line would pick up the rifle and keep moving. This was strategy. And, it's amazing to me that they weren't really prepared, to engage in a war or battle, but they still came, and...
Yeah, this is mind-boggling. It's like a hive mentality.
Yeah. How do you get, men to do that, and...
Yeah, I don't really have an answer to that. This kind of eludes reason. Why would a person go, to some distant place, for riches, or, what, just because of boredom? I don't know. I don't really. I wouldn't. If someone told me to go somewhere, I don't know, murder people or just do it, I wouldn't do it. I mean, there's no reason behind that. But maybe that's the cultural difference. Maybe that's the difference between Chinese people who, I mean, I don't know about now. There are various people who were born Chinese. Some of them are Buddhists and seem to be,
very calm,
and conscious beings. And others, I don't know, maybe they would do the same. Just there is an order, and that's what we do. Or maybe there's some sort of innate fear that refusal would entail
their own
ramifications, far-reaching ramifications.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know. It's really a slippery slope and a quagmire to try making sense of somebody else's psyche when we have not even talked with them. But, well, all we are left is just observation and drawing conclusions from the data that we have.
It just doesn't make sense. But anyway...
It happened.
It happened, yeah. And so we ended up in Busan. And I remember riding the train. And it took about two and a half days. Now it takes 4 hours, 4.5 hours to get there. But train would go and stop, they were train was like people just hung onto the train. There were people on top of the train. And in those days, the trains ran on coal. And so people were covered with soot, I remember thinking, I want to be on top. They tossed me into a freight car. I ended up sitting on top of bundles of, things.
Crates, yeah.
Crates, and I remember that. And we ended up in Busan, and Busan is where my sister was born. If you look up the internet, my sister Teresa, she died young, but she became quite a writer, artist.
Teresa Cha.
Yeah, Teresa Cha.
Check her out.
Yeah. She was born there, and she was born in a room, tiny room, about maybe half a size.
Of the studio.
Of the studio. And there was a curtain in between. There's family here and family here, and so...
Collocation.
Yeah. And then I remember refugee camps. I mean, that was, people were cooking outside. They were building like campfire and stuff, and they
Stoves,
stoves, and they were always fighting
over food or over
space. You know, they were always surrounding each other.
Those were mostly Korean people, right?
Yeah, they're all Koreans. And we weren't very welcomed at all, you know, and that's why. And I saw a lot of discrimination, I guess, you know, prejudice against people from the north. And
as I obviously I don't think that, but as the unwashed, I don't know, brutes, whatever.
Yeah.
That was the stigma or the stereotype, right? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I remember, you know, myself, you know, being yelled at a lot, you know, and refugee kids should go back where you came from, you know.
All right. Well, that did not help, I imagine. Back then, I think treatment of children was way different than it is today. I guess children were treated as good for noths, more or less, unfortunately. Which is it's I think it happened everywhere in the world, more or less. I mean, not to generalize, but it would be a general approach that children are, you know, were to be bred at a short leash, and
Yes, that's my early childhood memories.
Did you have any friends, any peers with whom you would stick around with?
We just kind of gathered around and played, you know. I don't have anyone except this one person. He sat next to me when I was in third grade. Fourth grade. That's when I decided to become a writer.
Yeah, tell the story as well.
Yeah,
about your friend, your colleague, and and the teacher.
Yeah, and in those days, we all kept, you know, where we originated from. You know, we kept that secret, and kids, they didn't know I was from Manchuria, because if they knew, then they would call me all kinds of different names, you know, and they would associate me with the vicious Russian soldiers. You know, I don't know why. But they would do that. They would associate me with the North Korean and Chinese invaders. And so anyway, we kept that part quiet. And the kid sitting next to me, I had no idea where he came from. But later, this was like 50 years later, we ran across somehow, I think through books, one of the books concerts or something, and his father was an independence fighter based in Shanghai. There was Chinese headquarters was in Shanghai at the time, and his father was the secretary to Tosan Chang-ho, and you know, and we can go into that later. But anyway, we found each other 50 years later. You know?
Seriously? Where in the U.S. or?
In the U.S., yeah.
There are no coincidences, they say.
No, no. It's very But we remembered our teacher, remembered, how we used to, it was not much of a school at the time, it was kind of like a tent, and that with a bunch of desks, and we talked about those things. Remember that, but he did remember me, I guess because my name was in a book, in a primary school book. My uncle, he was a writer. He wrote a textbook for second grade.
And you were the protagonist of the book. Amazing.
So he remembered my name. And so anyway, it was very fascinating.
Would you like to share your Korean name with us?
Yes. My last name is Cha, of course, and my given name is Hak-song.
Hak-song.
Hak-song, yeah. Right. So in Korean, they would call me Cha Hak-song. Okay. And my sister would be, she'd be Cha Hak-kyung.
Okay.
So we shared the same letter, Hak, and...
Is there a meaning to your name?
Well, Hak means study.
The studious one.
And second one is some kind of success, study and success. So anyway, that's what my parents had in mind when they named me.
And you became, the protagonist of a handbook.
Yeah.
Of a textbook, yeah.
Yeah, and so...
everybody knew you.
Well,
in advance.
Not everybody. Some people, thought, that's an unusual name to be in a kid's textbook. Normally it's like, in English we would call Johnny or something. But Hak-song would be something like, I don't know, some way out there, nobody heard of, and so...
Like Horace or
yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess some people did remember. I mean, this guy did. And
Jeffrey, yeah.
Yeah, and so I mean, it's I guess there were a number of writers in the family associated with a number of them, and so it became comfortable for me to think that writing is a thing to do. And like in that class, I think there was a composition class, and I wrote some composition at that time. I don't remember anything about it now, but something about some kid running home, something like that. I forget. But apparently the teacher thought it was okay, so she kept sharing my story.
In front of the others?
Yeah, in front of the others in class. And she kept doing that, I didn't know why. But eventually I figured out, okay, it must be good, because other kids kept looking at me, and so it must be good.
Were your peers giving you a hard time after she kind of... made you the example of excellence?
Yeah, they gave me, they made fun of me, and but when she did
teacher's pet, right?
Yeah, and when my teacher did that, I felt really good. I really felt good.
This kind of resounds with my experience. Back in the secondary school and in my high school, my Polish language teachers would also kind of, give me tips on my writing. They basically liked it, but I would always digress.
Yeah. Oh. Okay.
And my turn of phrase would be rather lofty. I would say sometimes it would be kind of dreamy, off the topic in a way. I would start on the topic and I would drift from it. And yeah, at some point, my high school teacher was concerned that I would pass my finals, but not with a grade good enough for the level that I represented. Because back in the day, probably it's the same even now, but you either write your essay during the final exam if you take the advanced or the extended Polish language exam at the end of high school. You are asked to write the essay, and it's on a given topic. You have to refer to a work of art that's given and basically dissect it. And so it means it's basically writing to fill somebody's frame, just to give them what they expect.
That sounds like government to me.
That sounds very government. But there is a way. There is an exceptional way you can write outside of that framework, under the condition that your argument is convincing and is especially good. So on the day of the exam, I just thought to myself, pardon my French, screw it. I'm just writing the way I want it to be written. And obviously I referred to those texts of culture that were given. But I just went nuts with it. I just went, did it my way. And I got the full score.
Wow.
But that was a close call because, you never know who's going to review your work. Will they like it? Will they consider it valuable, even if it digressed from the key? So but unlike you, I'm not an accomplished author at all, and this makes your story way more interesting. How this very moment motivated you to write. So you got positive feedback, first of all, but there had to be something more. What did you like about writing? Was it like natural for you to like this process, and only with the passage of time you would realize what makes you like it? Or was it instantaneous? You just knew this is your thing?
Wow, what a great question. Couple of things, I think. First of all, it really made me feel good to be writing, because it puts me into in a different world, kind of, and
a different space.
Space, yeah. And I like being there, and the other sort of kind of a sense of maybe feel obligated to record things, and I said, well, I should write this so that other people can read it. There was sort of a sense of that, but I think mostly because I just, it makes me feel good doing it,
As you mentioned, that was the activity that was always there in your family. It was either your grandfather or your father, in fact, and uncles, cousins. Writing was your trade.
Yeah, it was part.
And your
I grew up with it, so
expression.
Yeah, so it felt like, well, that's what I should do, and when I read something that's written really well, and different way. You talked about writing differently. It really interests me. I'm curious and I want to know. I want to follow. And, I don't know I don't feel any time passing. It's like
When you're in the zone.
yeah, in the zone, and I just like reading an interesting book, just stay up all night and read it, and when I'm writing, I want to feel that, being in the zone, because it doesn't happen all the time, and so when you get into it, you don't feel time passing at all. And
you let go of your small self
yeah.
and kind of open yourself to metaphors, to connections. Is it this way for you? It really depends, but for me, when the writing flow comes up, it's like you just jump from connotation to connotation. My forms are much shorter. These are very short stories, images, in fact. Very metaphorical, very dreamy, archetypical, or you should say archetypal, yeah, which makes it way more malleable. Perhaps that's easier for me, but in this state, you just jump from one connection to another, one association to another, and it just goes. You kind of make yourself a portal to meaning, to sense.
Yeah, exactly. That's a process, that is kind of exciting. When it happens and it flows, and it's
because you also don't know what's coming up, but it comes up. It just kind of pours out there, and you're surprised even in a way how the phrase is being turned, how what the construction is, and what doors it opens.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. You surprise yourself. That's good. That's a good feeling.
But it's not always like that.
No.
Sometimes you need to grind it out. More often than not. Huh? Yeah.
But in the case of a book, then there's certain kind of inspiration. And you were doing this human story, and that's an inspiration, and you want to keep going. Other stories, and the subjects I chose, they sort of inspired me, because I want to understand now what happened to me when I was growing up. Now, I didn't know at the time, but I want to know what was going on at the time, and that's kind of I guess inspires me to do what I do or keep going. But it is actual people, what people go through, and that's very interesting to me. And it's like any other history. Korean history is very complicated, and there are many other complicated histories.
Yeah, because it can be written by different people from different sides of the barricade, I imagine, and every single one of them would have a dose of reason. Yeah, but at that point, you back in school, you realize that you're going to be a writer, and it feels good, it feels right. It's kind of your vocation or your destiny to become a writer. And how did that develop alongside with your life developments? So you are in South Korea.
Yeah, South Korea, and I went to ranked high school, and I kept writing. I was more interested in writing and reading, and the school papers, they printed my stories and stuff. It really made me feel good, and people read it and stuff. And when I was ninth 10th grade. Seung-man he was the first Korean president. And his party manipulated the election. And there was a huge uprising. And during the process, one of the young boys was killed. And I was very upset by that. What did he do, to deserve
this end?
Yeah. And so I joined the uprising. I just went nuts. And so as a kid,
A teenager, right? Or not?
Yeah, teenager. Ran around the streets, and they were shooting, bullets flying. And basically, my father decided, okay, no, you keep that up, you're going to die, you're going to get killed. So we had a distant relative in Hawaii. We call her Hawaii grandma, and you go over there. So I ended up going over to Hawaii. I was 15.
Alone?
Yeah.
Your parents stayed in South Korea?
In South Korea, yeah.
And your sister went with you, or she
No,
stayed?
I was the only one, because I was the troublemaker at the time.
Yeah. So they decided to put you on a distant island,
Yeah.
away from the world, so that you don't set it on fire.
Banished me.
Like Napoleon. Kudos to you.
Saint Helena, yeah.
Kudos to your 15 years, you.
So that's how I ended up in Hawaii,
This sounds so amazing, actually. Yeah. Hawaii. Did you write about it? You were? I imagine you were put on a ship.
Oh, I flew.
You flew. That was quite luxurious, I would say.
Yeah, it was early airplane days, I guess. I flew on a BOAC. Doesn't exist anymore.
What is that? BOAC.
British something AC. I forgot what it was, but I think it's now British Air or something. Yeah, but
and it flew you directly to Hawaii, or did you have any layovers?
Stopped in Japan.
That way, right?
Then from Japan to Hawaii, yeah.
Was it a long stopover in Japan?
No, I thought it wasn't long. It was just
a
change
couple of
planes
hours. Okay.
and just keep going. Yeah.
Okay. How did you feel about stepping on the Japanese soil just for a brief moment? Were you a little bit...
felt strange.
Okay.
Yeah, that felt strange. As I wish I didn't have to do that, but
a little self-conscious.
yeah.
Okay.
But it took off, and my friends were back in Korea, and they were still demonstrating.
And all the fun. You were stripped of all the fun.
Yeah, and
sent to your Hawaii grandma. Exactly.
And I met some old friends, recently, and
Thanks to what, Facebook? Or other avenues?
I had a like a book talk. I was talking about Susan On's book in L.A. once, and then he happened to be there, and things like that happen quite a bit, because of the books and stuff. So
if he filled you up on what you missed out on, right?
Yeah. Phil, and he, a lot of the kids, they were excited for a while, and then they calmed down and, went back to school. And, looking back now, I says, geez, I was just a kid, what the hell did I know? Well, they were gun sounds everywhere, and that really excited me. And
How close were you to being shot?
oh, very close. Yeah.
Were you wounded?
No. They were shooting, and I was running around in the busiest intersection in Seoul. And older student, like college students, and they were riding. They confiscated police trucks, and they were riding that, and so I want to be on that truck. But they wouldn't let me on that truck, and and then later on, they confiscated army tanks, and
Tanks?
yeah, and they were riding tanks around. So I thought that was really, I want to be on that too, but they wouldn't let me on. I was too little, and so anyway,
did they ever let you go inside a tank? No.
No. Too little, too small.
Oh, perhaps good for you. Yeah. So, yeah.
So anyway, I arrived in Hawaii.
Yes, after this brief episode of a teenager turned freedom fighter, you arrived to Hawaii and your Hawaii grandma. But before we continue with that, how about we make just a fast leap to one of your books?
Oh, okay, sure.
Let's say, Willow Tree Shade. What is it about?
It's about Susan An, and her married name is Cuddy, Susan An Cuddy, and she was the daughter of those An Chang-ho I had mentioned earlier. But those An Chang-ho was major independence fighter fighting against the Japanese occupation. And he first came to United States in 1902 as a student. And then he never, never got to go to school. He ended up, because 1905 was when Japan took over Korea's all foreign affairs, doing Korea a favor. And so that's when he stopped everything and said, okay. He organized a lot of organizations. He's probably the most traveled independence. He did independence for all over the world. He went to Mexico, of course, Hawaii, back to Korea, China, and he was in St. Petersburg for a while, Berlin. He went to London. I mean, he was everywhere, and somehow he sired his daughter. He sired 5 children actually. And I don't know when he had time, but every time he came to America, a child was born. And his first child was Philip Ahn. He was a Hollywood movie actor, and he has a star in the Hollywood Walk of Fame and stuff, and he was a very interesting actor. And Susan was his first daughter, and she wanted to, during the World War II, she joined the U.S. Navy because to fight the Japanese Navy. And,
a woman in the Navy, right? Oh,
yeah,
amazing.
Yeah, a woman in the Navy, and she was a trainer for U.S. Navy pilots. And
how did she learn to fly in the first place?
Well, she wasn't a pilot herself, but she was a specialist in training pilots in new equipment. And so she had a model, and all these pilots had to come in and do the training in order to continue to fly. And so, there are stories like all these, veteran combat, commanders, pilots and stuff, and they come.
They walk into the room and see
and
the lady.
And, they didn't want to listen to her, and so she has to be tough.
Yeah, I wonder how she exercised obedience.
Well, she told them, says, okay, in the sky, you may be the boss. Down here, I'm the boss. If you don't pass my class, you don't fly again.
Ouch.
And she had to say that many times, apparently. And so then she went on to, after the war, she went on to become a naval intelligence officer. And she worked in Washington, D.C. for a while. And that was kind of interesting, too, because when she first showed up at naval headquarters, somebody wrote a memo. It says, there's an Asian woman running around in the naval headquarters, and maybe she's a spy or something, Japanese spy. So the memo went around, and so she had to fight that, that kind of stuff. But anyway, she ended after naval intelligence. That's where she met her husband. He was also intelligence officer. Anyway, and then she went on to NSA. And became a code breaker. And she supervised about 300 or so, smartest people to break actually the Russian code.
I'm bowled over. What a career.
Yeah. Quite a lady. But in the beginning, it was just going to be a pamphlet, maybe 20 page, 30 page. And then as time went on, it just kept growing, and it became a book.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated because she covered her father, period, which is, takes in the Japanese occupation and the independence work. I learned a lot about myself while I was doing her book. And then she herself goes into World War II. And so it covers that, range, period of time. And so that's what kept me going. Of course, she was fascinating. Lady, what a lady. And story goes
tireless.
Wow, yeah. And these admirals at NSA, nowadays, these admirals would bother her, try to tell her stuff, and she would just shout right back at them. And she got away with it because she knew things. She sensed
was valuable.
Things, ahead of time. And
what a biography.
Yeah, I really enjoyed writing that book.
So we are in Hawaii right now. Back to Hawaii.
Oh, back to Hawaii, yeah. When I landed there, it was, first thing they do to you is as you get off the plane, they give you these leis out of flowers, and that smells so good. It's just so peaceful. And you see palm trees and stuff, and this is like a different world. It is a different world.
This is where your father relegated you to.
And, people walk slow, and there's no sounds like bullets flying, nobody screaming. This is so peaceful. I'm going, what is this? What is this? So different from what I was accustomed to. And so it took me a while to adjust to it. And, okay. This is something else. And at first I missed all the excitement,
The action.
The action. And then, slowly I got used to it. And people there were very, very helpful. And says, oh my God, they really cared about me, and other than my family, my families, of course, they cared about me, but outside of family, they really were interested in. And I had good teachers. I went to a Catholic high school run by Maryknoll sisters, and they really helped me, speak English and write English. And it took me about 6 months or so to get used to talk to people, and I guess I was sort of fast learner too, and I had a dictionary. Oh, it's not a big one about that. I memorized the whole thing. Did stupid things like that, but it really helped me at the time. And the nuns also interested me in studying Latin. So I studied Latin. Really fascinating it was. And that helped me.
And that's how you learned that repetitia est mater studiorum.
Yeah. And, they, I must say, I've never run into people like that before, and so, and I kept writing, with my broken English and stuff, and I wrote a book in high school about, I forgot what it was, actually, and I probably can't even read it now, and there are notebooks, I had notebooks everywhere, and I read some of that now, and I say, what the hell was that about?
What was I thinking?
Yeah, what was I thinking?
Who is that? Right.
But then I, started thinking about what to do for life, and living, and okay, I like writing, but I didn't think I could make a living as a writer, and so I decided, go into engineering. So I became an engineer, and
at the university.
At a university,
right.
Yeah.
Which one?
And I went to school in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. There was Marquette University. It's a Jesuit school.
By the way, Milwaukee has this reputation of being, I think, of being also not a mecca maybe, but one of the more densely populated areas, more densely populated by Poles.
Yes. yes.
Apart from Chicago, which
Apart
is
from
basically
Chicago, yeah.
our ground.
And there's a whole, Milwaukee is southern part of Milwaukee is, Polish section of the town, and I had a lot of Polish friends.
Really?
Yeah.
They told you about Poland?
They didn't know much about Poland, and they were mostly second generation Polish at the time, and so they didn't talk about too much. They were more interested in girls and skiing and stuff,
Yeah, I imagine being 20-something, right?
Yeah, right. My dean of engineering school was he was a Polish gentleman by the name of Jadalowicz, and his name was, long, usual, and
With an vich at the end.
Yeah.
It's either ski or vich most of the time.
Jadalowicz. It's a fine gentleman. He helped a lot. He helped me a lot.
Glad to hear that.
Yeah. And we didn't know how to, pronounce his name too well, so we called him Mr. Alphabet.
Mr. Alphabet. Okay.
I don't know if it's, but anyway.
As an alpha and omega, know it all.
Yeah. And, he didn't mind it. He thought it was funny.
Cool story. So out of the university into the engineering world, so that's how you earned your first
Yes.
million. Metaphorically speaking.
Well, put my family through anyway, and so
What did you do for a living?
I ended up as a petroleum engineer, and so I was mostly involved in offshore drilling, and we build structures and pipelines.
Amazing.
Anyway,
Yeah, petrodollars.
$, yeah, and it was made a living. It was a good living, I guess.
What is the most important thing when planning an oil rig? Because that's what you built, right? Offshore oil rigs.
Safety. I was mostly concerned with safety, and we were very concerned about pollution because that was a big topic at the time.
So did you focus in your search for the right spot? It's not only where oil is, but also, I guess, if the foundation, like the seabed, is a good place to erect the structure.
Rigs, yeah.
So how do you construct the rig, the platform? You have to have those pylons. So you construct them onshore and then you just put them in the water with what? With the bottom made of cement? Or do you fix it to the bedrock somehow with divers in the water fixing it? How do you do that?
First, what we call a huge structure called a jacket. And that's what you see, structures, like trusses and stuff, and build that, and float it out to the location. And then, it's a very complex process, but you fill up, you balance out the jacket and lower it to the floor. And then you just drive piles like crazy. There's long piles, sometimes 200 meters. Keep driving until basically bedrock. And then you fill it with cement. And those are, you do that in shallow waters, basically, up to 200 feet, 300 feet. In the deeper waters, then you float out these floating platforms.
How do you keep it away from drifting?
Oh, just same way your gondola people do. Just keep they got
recalibrating and putting it back into the right position.
Boosters, you got boosters.
Okay. Fascinating.
And, anchors too. Huge long anchors. These platforms have about 12 different anchors way out there, and of course you got boosters, with huge propellers to keep the position in place. Do it all in, nowadays I guess they use a lot of satellite stuff, and I imagine it's all AI now, but in those days it was all,
radars and people.
Radar, feel,
Yeah, this kind of, I don't know if you've heard about this, but there is a micronation that's called Sealand, and you heard about this. It's just right off the British coast. It's a fake nation that issues passports whoever pays, and they are basically based on an oil rig, which is off duty, has been out of duty for long, and that's a little curious. So, does your career in engineering and in the oil business was that your inspiration to write the Do or Die Entrepreneur, a Korean American businessman's journey?
It's Do or Die Entrepreneur that came after Susan's book, and his name is Mr. Pack, and
so it's not about you. It's not an autobiography.
Yeah, it's a biographical.
Of another person who's called. Sorry to catch you in. What's his name?
Pack. Mr. Pack.
Mr. Pack.
Young Pack. Yeah, and he was interesting because he came to the United States with $50 in a pocket, and he became a billionaire, and so created his own steel beam. It caught on, so he made a huge success out of it, and he was also a disciple, not direct disciple, but disciple of Tosan Anchang-ho, and Susan's the one who introduced him to me, and you should talk to him. He's an interesting fella, and she said. So okay. So started talking to him. It turns out that his story was fascinating also. But his story covers the time period from the Korean War, because he escaped from Pyongyang, capital of North Korea, thinking that he would return back home in a few days, and it never turned out that way. So he ended up in the United States. He went there, he got a scholarship from the organization that serves Anchang-ho's principles and philosophy. So he got, and all he had was $50 in his pocket. And he went through life in America as a busboy to begin with. That's what everybody does. Waiter. And he went to a university in Michigan. He also studied engineering. He became a civil engineer, and he became interested in selling first Japanese-made steel in the United States, and that was a big market at the time. So he started out with that, and then he decided to make his own, invent his own steel beam for these trucks, and he took those beams and sold it all over the United States. And all the freight trucks now have his beams.
Amazing.
Yeah, and so that was a fascinating story to write about. And he always thought about going someday. He thought he would go back to North Korea, and he eventually does visit North Korea as a representative of Economic Advisory Committee from United States. So he goes there and meets his mother, finally.
After all these years.
After all those years, yeah.
And then he had to part ways with her again, or
Yeah.
did he take her with him?
No, he couldn't take her, you know, and he had to say goodbye.
It's tragic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tragic, but also it's the story of the American dream coming true.
Yes.
From scratch to riches.
Yeah, exactly. And he did that, and I've never seen a hard worker like him. You know, he's very inspiring. You know, in a sense that anybody, you know, who tries to make it, and that was his goal, make money to, you know, bring his family, you know, his mother, and so he ended up going to North Korea twice. And first time they wouldn't let him meet her. And second time he went, he did, you know, meet her, and he brought her all kinds of presents, you know, but all these expensive shoes, and she couldn't use it anyway. But
would be confiscated, I guess.
Or, you know, you can't wear it outside your home, you know, and yeah, it will be confiscated anyway. So,
what happened, I wonder, if you mind me asking, with your parents when you set shop in the U.S., graduated, were working in the oil business?
Eventually they all moved over to America.
That must have been, gratifying as well. You must have felt great in a way that you paved the way and that you brought your, old timers.
I guess.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything.
They came on their own.
Came on their own.
Okay.
Yeah, and so he by that time he was in a trading business, international trading business, and he was doing pretty well. He was Korean products were doing well, and he would do things like import what Korea needed and export Korean products. And so he had a company. He and his partner made a company in Hawaii to make it, I guess, more substantial. And so he brought. Well, actually, they came over to keep an eye on me, I guess. Anyway, they came to Hawaii, and then I went off to university. They stayed there for longer, and then they moved to San Francisco because of the business there. So,
your first book was Willow Tree Shade, right?
Yeah.
It came out after your graduation, during your uni days.
It came out after I retired from engineering, actually, I finished my engineering career, I guess, then I didn't need the money anymore. The kids grew up, and so I decided to go back to what I wanted to do, all my life. And so that was writing. And as an engineer, I had time, to travel and stuff. And when I, go on, rigs, and it gave me time to read, and it was, good experience traveling all over the place.
And conducive to the end result, which is you publishing books, writing and publishing books.
Yeah. Oh, so the books came out, and I didn't mean it to become a book, but it became a book, and it turned out pretty well. And so, okay, this is what I'm going to do now. And so I became an ex-engineer to a writer.
And that also brought you to writing Kim Jong-il's biography.
Biography, yeah. I met a gentleman by the name of Huang. His last name is Huang Chang-yup, and he was International Secretariat for the Communist Party of North Korea, and he was a mentor and advisor to Kim Ir Sen and also Kim Jong-il. And he had defected from North Korea in 1997. This was around the time of the Great Famine of North Korea. And I was lucky to meet him. And, a number of years going back and forth to Korea, and I wanted to write a book about North and South Korea, because that's very much part of the Korean history. And so I was interested in his point of view as a defector, and thinking that he would have the intimate knowledge of what, the Kim regime is all about. So he was fascinating. He was fascinating, and he studied at University of Moscow as a philosopher, and he actually wrote the original document called Juche. That is the governing document for North Korean Communist Party. And of course, there's a story about that too. And Kim Jong-il took it and massaged it, and to fit his purpose. And so he was very angry about that. But he wrote about 27 books, and he couldn't bring any of his manuscripts or books out from North Korea, or manuscripts. So when he went to South Korea, he rewrote all the books from his memory. Fascinating.
Amazing.
Yeah, amazing man. And he was very, of course, he knew all about Leninism, Stalinism. He was a student of, he talked about Hegel a lot, but then he was also Korean, and he tried to convert a lot of his philosophies into Korean culture. And I think that's what Kim Ir Sen was very, found, what he found very attractive. But in the end, he was basically, this is my own judgment, Hwang was basically sort of a front for Kim Il Sung and Kim Jong-il. They really didn't believe what Hwang had to say. And Hwang said that Kim Il Sung never read Lenin, period. He never understood Lenin. But he talked about him a lot, and so, but anyway, I found Mr. Hwang very fascinating. When he defected, he went to China, defected in China first, and he was invited, defected to the South Korean embassy in China, Beijing, and he had to stay there under guard for a couple months because the North Korean agents were
roaming about.
Yeah, swarming. They were trying to climb over the walls and stuff
to
get him. Yeah, and so China finally decided to or agreed to transfer him to a third country, which is Philippines, and from Philippines he came over to South Korea, and he was heavily guarded all his rest of his time, and all the his locations and his whereabouts, and his activities, they were all guarded, and South Korean intelligence officers surrounded him all the time. I think he had maybe about 20 officers guarding him the whole time. And when I went to visit him, I had to, sign everything, my life away, just to get to see him. After a while, they recognized me, so it became much easier. But
so you met him in the U.S. or in South Korea?
In South Korea.
South Korea, okay. Yeah. Sounds like a crown witness in a way, because he was a witness to many atrocities and abominable phenomena.
Yeah.
I wonder what's his recollection of Kim Jong-il, his quirks. What was he like as a person?
He referred to Kim Jong-il as, as a movie nut. Other than that, he was very smart guy. And he and his uncle, Kim Ir Sung's brother, were competing for power. And Kim Jong-il won over his uncle, and that is by writing so-called the 10, commandments of North Korea, and which is practically the governing document. It's not the Constitution of North Korea. It's not the communist ideals. It is this 10 commandment, which every 1 through 10, every commandment starts with "You shall adore and obey Kim Il Sung." And Kim Ir Sen, of course, he liked that, so he ended up ended up appointing Kim Jong-il as the successor of North Korea. But Hwang was he was not fond of Kim Jong-il at all. I think he was kind of sympathetic towards Kim Il Sung, because he felt that Kim Il Sung he actually did care about the people, whereas Kim Jong-il didn't. Kim Jong-il knew only himself.
And was drunk with power.
Drunk with power, and he knew how to get it, and his power was propaganda.
Would you say that he was, what you call it, delusional?
I didn't get that impression. I got the impression that from Hwang, he knew exactly what he was doing.
So rather calculated.
Calculating, yeah, very much so. And he really didn't care about anything other than himself.
Narcissistic.
Yeah, very narcissistic. And he cared about, only thing he cared about, he did care about his family, but many of his family circle, rejected him. And when he was rejected, he didn't understand why. Because after all those things he had done for him, and that's what impression I got. And so that happened with Hwang also. And Kim Jong-il was very upset when Hwang defected. And, first words out of Hwang when he defected was, his message to Kim Jong-il. It says, socialism is dead. What he meant was, Kim Jong-il's system, not the socialism as we know socialism, but that was his first words. And so Kim Jong-il's drive or his method
was corrupted.
And definitely, and Hwang told him so. And so Kim Jong-il was, obviously he was upset. Didn't understand why Hwang would, leave him, but eventually Kim Jong-il said, well, if the old man wants to go, let him go, something like that. And
but then he had second thoughts because he realized that Hwang would be a liability to him.
Yeah, and he did try to assassinate him many times. He had, intelligence types, to assassinate Hwang while in the South, and so he truly didn't let him go.
Is Hwang still alive?
No,
but he passed away.
He passed away, yeah.
Naturally.
Yeah, naturally.
It's good that Kim Jong-il's and Kim Jong-un's henchmen never got him.
Whoever got him, if anybody gotten to him, it would have been a hero in Kim Jong-il's eyes, and would have gotten much reward, probably.
I really would like to deepen the topic of also, living in the U.S. But I think we will be wrapping up slowly. Could you, tell us what are you doing nowadays, and maybe also a message to people out there. If there is one thing that certainly you have learned many life lessons, but is there one particularly poignant one?
The message or the lesson I've learned was that people have to be nice to each other, and we've seen a lot of autocratic people. I've not directly, but I've written about them, and it doesn't make it. It doesn't last. People are here because human is good. Being human is good. Being a bad guy may give him temporary victory or whatever, but it wasn't meant to be like that from the beginning. I think, well, as long as there are more good people than bad people, I think we'll be okay. I keep thinking about that. So we really need to try to make, more good people, and so that they can help other people.
And it really comes down to us if we set the right example.
Yes, everybody. I've gotten a lot of help along the way, and I want to pay back all those. And the way to do it is to, encourage or help young people. So I help these young defectors from North Korea, and I pick them and help them so that they can help other people, because future is with them. And it's not politics. It's not, and these wars, and it's not right. It's not right. And once people understand that, I think it'll be a better world, hopefully.
Where people can find your books?
It's on Amazon.com, and that's where they can find. I guess that's the best spot to find books. And Willow Tree, it's been out of print a while, so that I see that price is like $1,000 or something. So we're gonna reprint.
I checked out the book today. It was Willow Tree Shade, and it was $1,000-something.
That's ridiculous.
Whoosh, yeah.
What impressed me the most, I feel that we have to write about what Polish people did for Ukrainian women and children, and I'm most impressed by how that came about so naturally. And I think it's a wonderful story in all of human history. You just don't run into a story like that. And I want to learn more about it, and hopefully I'll talk to you more about it too.
Yeah, this entails a couple of things. One, that we might be expecting a new title from you, and two, that you will be possibly back to Poland.
Yes, definitely. Yeah,
That's perfect, because I have the feeling that we have a plethora of topics, of other topics to tackle, which I will do with all pleasure. And again, it's been an honor. Thank you for visiting us and telling us these moving stories of your life that truly are stories of a witness to an era.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed this talk, and in your wonderful, wonderful studio. Oh, this is very nice. Yeah, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was John Cha. You were listening and watching The Human Story. Stick with us for more. Peace out.